BMW.
That we do. One minor issue there is we're way more than halfway home. We talked, what did we do last hour? We talked to Kark for quite some time. That went long. That's okay. We like talking to our guy, Paul Carcaterre. We talked a lot of lax. We talked a little Fran Brown with Kark. He's doing the lax. He's doing the spring game. He's doing it all. We talked a little Portal Watch. We are at hard Dakota Lafew watch now. Just there's the vibes in the universe that things may be happening. What are these things? I don't know. When are they going to be happening? Like 1 minute after the show ends? Yeah, that's how this week is going. So we'll see on that. And our guy Fran Brown has reeled in another verbal for the class of 2025. Their 14th verbal is Terrell Wilfong, one of the top wide receivers in the class, top 60 in the pile of wideouts nationally, is ranked by various rankings. Right now, he's one of the top 20 players out of the great state of New Jersey. So another verbal for Fran Brown. The total now is 14, which equals the most that anybody has collected thus far in the ACC. Speaking of the ACC, let's move forward to hour number 2. Got to visit with this guy. We could have brought him in live, but he's getting ready for the old concert, the old Boss concert, the old Bruce Springsteen concert in town. Half for that, half for work. But he is ESPN reporter David Hale. We love talking to David about all things ACC. Got a chance to get his first meeting with Fran Brown earlier today, and we got David in here. We got him in a little earlier to turn him loose for the concert. So we'll play it back for you now. Here's my conversation, always enjoyable, with David Hale from ESPN from earlier today. Well, a pleasant surprise here, an in-town visit from our guy David Hale, one of ESPN's great ACC writers. He's actually here to break down Springsteen. You're here for the concert, nothing else.
Entirely a Springsteen-related interview. I have no comments on the ACC.
Okay, there we go. We don't care about the ACC lawsuits or Fran Brown or.
Let me ask you. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Which happens first? Springsteen stops touring, or the ACC falls apart?
Oh man, that's a great question. How old? Do we know how old the boss is without looking it up?
I want to say 76. I want to say 76.
Man, he's older than I thought.
In his 70s.
Okay. Artists have like 70,000 retirement tours before they ever actually. Does falls apart mean FSU and Clemson leave, or the whole league is non-existent anymore?
Let's say you either are going to a Springsteen show or you're going to an ACC game. Which one no longer counts as like seeing a real thing? Like, You're now looking at a facsimile of what used to be.
I think I'm going to give the ACC credit. I think they're going to outlast the boss.
I don't know. He's in good shape.
Well, he is in good shape. I mean, I watched the Curb episode the other day. He looked phenomenal, save for the fake COVID he had. It's a great question because, what's going on here? Let's start with this. I mean, you're here for Bruce. You were here and went to practice today, got to meet Fran Brown and do the whole thing. But where is the league? The contract's through 2036. We keep tossing that number around. Is there a shot in hell there is an ACC in 2036?
I don't think there's – well, I'll say this. Whatever college football looks like in 2036, I don't think is going to look very much like it looks right now. So – whether that means the ACC exists in some other form, whether the ACC doesn't exist at all because conferences don't exist at all, whether the ACC exists because conferences are now just sort of like divisions within a larger sort of like the NFC East, any of those things are possible. What I don't think is possible is that the current structure of the ACC resembles anything like what the world is going to look like in 2036. And the question to me has always been, where is the line of demarcation between what feels like we're like life today and when things change so much that it no longer resembles what life is like today? So, I don't know. The number I always hear from folks is sort of like around 2030, like 29, 30, 31. You have all of the other Big 12, Big 10, SEC TV contracts coming up again. Maybe that's when we move to Super League type of situations, whatever. I mean, there's so many moving pieces from the courts to how we're paying players and, who wants to expand and what the different commissioners think. Like, all of this stuff is so up in the air that it's almost impossible to make any real predictions. And one of the funny things that I've heard from a few folks lately that are sort of on the outside looking in at a lot of these decisions, coaches and the like, that have strong opinions and are living it day in and day out, but have no control over the outcomes, is like, wouldn't it be great if somebody in a position of power would just articulate what the end game looks like?
Yeah.
Like if Greg Sankey could just come out and say, like, this is what my vision for college football in 10 years is. I'm not quite sure how we're getting there, but this is the end point we're trying to get to. At least we could all get behind an idea, because right now it is just a bunch of craziness everywhere where everyone is complaining about what it's not without ever articulating what they think it should be.
You know, this is kind of what's been bothering me, because I think there actually are several endpoints that could make sense. And I think the path, you know, some people say, well, the journey is the thing. No, I think the journey is what's breaking everything at this point.
Yeah.
Like, the journey may be getting us to a point where it's going to screw up college sports so bad they can't be fixed down the line. Like, if we could jump ahead and have a 30-team Super League, and then, like, maybe Syracuse is in the next group of 30 for football, then, you know, basketball and all that stuff sort of resembles what it is. Like, for a school like Syracuse, that might actually be a great end result, but I don't know if the path can take it there the way we're going right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I had an AD tell me a couple of years ago, like after the Texas-Oklahoma stuff broke, like, learn as much as you can about English soccer, because I feel like that's the direction we're going.
Which wouldn't be terrible.
It wouldn't be terrible. Like, you know, Championship League soccer is fun. Like, and in some ways more fun than Premier League, because it's not all the moneyed powers that you have there. And if Syracuse has, if you want to buy into the belief system that Syracuse has no chance at winning a national title under the current rules, well, winning a national title as sort of the tier 2 of a larger league is not the worst thing in the world. I actually asked this question on Twitter last week. I was just curious what folks thought. I actually heard from a good bit of Syracuse fans about, like, would you, if there was sort of a tiered system and your team was not in the top tier, would you watch more? Would you watch about the same? Would you be less invested than you previously were? And I'd say it was probably 2-to-1 less invested.
Interesting.
So, you know, and I don't know, maybe that's more theoretical, and when it actually rubber meets the road, it would be different too. I've talked to a lot of administrators who say, I'm fine with the idea of a Super League if it is a thing that you opt into or out of. And the Super League just says, like, here's what the constraints are. You have to play by these rules. You have to spend this much on salary. You have to invest this much, whatever. So you can't be New Mexico State and spend $20 million a year on your football or your entire athletics budget and still be in this league. But if you want to spend and compete, then yeah, you're welcome to come join. And I think there's some upside to that. I hate the idea that we are essentially going to bifurcate college sports by who has the biggest audience, because to me, that's no fun.
Yeah, and, you know, maybe for football it could work, but, like, why you got to screw up our basketball because of all this? Why do we screw up everything else?
We are constantly hammering square pegs into round holes just to make it make sense for football when it makes no sense for anything else.
Yeah, that's what's tough. Like, realistically, if you could just separate the two, and that's maybe the end point, it would actually work. And I guess what's funny to their point of, hey, well, could Syracuse ever compete for a national championship in football? I think everyone's opinion on that changed in the last 4 months, because I think a lot of people would have been answering no. Fran Brown walks in day one. He's like, yeah, this is what we're trying to do, which it's made things a lot of fun around here the last 4 months. What's your view as a guy that covers the whole league of what's going on up here the last few months?
Well, look, any narrative shift is good, because where things were was just too, and I don't even think, like, some of Dino's frustrations that he was happy to tell the world about are not wrong. They were legitimate.
Right.
But it's sort of like you don't sell pessimism, right? You've got to sell optimism. And so step one is find some optimism to sell. And Fran Brown has done that. One of the things I really like about his messaging and how he's approaching the job is compare Syracuse to a place like Wake Forest. So Wake Forest has probably in some ways a lot more limitations than Syracuse does.
Even a smaller school. I mean,
right, exactly. Private school, very small alumni base. You know, they probably have access to more recruits locally, but have a lot more competition for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what Dave Clawson did well there was say, what is it that are strengths of Wake Forest? And we're going to build around that. And that's the same conversation Fran Brown will have. He's not interested in all the reasons Syracuse isn't Alabama. He actually is interested in what makes Syracuse unique, and we are going to sell the hell out of that. And so I think that is the right approach. Now, I mean, you can think back to when Dino got here, and there was a whole idea of, like, he's going to do things different, and that's what's going to – at some point you got to win. You can only sell for so long before you show some results. And so, look, there's pressure to do that. But again, you just go to practice and look at some of the dudes there, and it looks like a more talented, more physically imposing team in a lot of areas. So that's good. I think it's a wide open ACC this year. So do I think Syracuse is going to win the league this year? That's a lofty aspiration, but can you get to 8 or 9 wins? I don't see any reason why that can't happen if things go well, particularly given the schedule they have. And if that happens, well, then you've got a little bit of the snowball rolling down the hill and picking up steam. And who's to say again where the reality of college football lands in a few years? The infrastructure may have changed enough. I mean, if you're invested in paying players a market value, and NIL has been brought in-house, which I think is a thing that's coming sooner than later.
Feels like it.
Then maybe there's an opportunity there, or at least an opportunity to say we're going to at least aim for the fences a couple of years, and if that doesn't work, we'll take a step back and rebuild for a few more years, and then aim for the fences again. Look, anything's better than just staying at we're a 5 or 6 win team, and that's the best we're ever going to do.
Yeah, I mean, from a Syracuse perspective, getting to number 2 in the country with the BCS or number 4 in the playoffs, that's that sounds hard. Or making the ACC, the amount of ACC title game emails I've deleted over the years, it's just you're supposed to win the division that had Florida State and Clemson in it. Sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Getting to number 12 in the country, well, not easy. All right.
Yeah,
that at least seems feasible.
And I think there's, go back to 2018. That was doable in 2018.
No, they were sitting literally 13th in the country at one point.
So there is, I think, a pathway. And again, I'm not here to criticize the previous regime. I think that you make do with what you have, but at some point you realize you've walked down a path, you've gotten lost on this path, it's not getting you anywhere. You better double back around and try starting a different, and take a different direction. And I think that's what Fran Brown's doing. And look, I am skeptical to a certain extent of a guy with 0 previous coordinator experience, but I mean, also, again, what is inside the box going to get you at Syracuse?
Exactly.
You're not out Alabama. You're not out Clemson. Do something that is, zig when everybody else is zagging. And that's a little bit of what this is too. And I think, again, this is a guy who's coming in who has the right approach. Whether or not it works out or not, I don't know. But you've got to have the right alignment from top to bottom, and I think that at least exists now.
Yeah, it's he's hit all the right notes since taking over, and it was one of those things 2 days before he got hired. Who?
Yeah.
Literally had never, I think with your colleague, Andrea Adelson, I think we had this conversation on the air. She's like, I know a lot of people. I'd never heard of the guy before.
The other thing I think that's worth noting here is you bring in Fran Brown, who is just at Georgia, that has played for national championships. He knows what it's supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he came up under Matt Rule, who is a guy who has won a lot of football games, and he knows what it's supposed to look like. You bring in a Kyle McCord, and many of the other transfers that they've come from are not just good players, but players who have come from winning programs who know what it's supposed to look like. And some of it is when you're flying blind and you've never won, accepting mediocrity becomes a lot easier. Mm-hmm. When you are used to winning and you know what it's supposed to look like, accepting mediocrity, whether it's in the weight room, in practice, whatever, it's unacceptable because you know that that's not what it looks like.
And to a man, we've had all these guys on over the last month, McCord, the Texas A&M guys, Georgia guys, Bama guys that are here now. They all said, literally all of them, this is the hardest spring ball we've ever had. I'm like, all right, well, you played for Saban, you played for Kirby. All right, I will believe you. As David Hale is with us. Before I let you go, David, we got to make you play lawyer again, which is your side gig now. What's going on with FSU and Clemson? Are they going to be in the league tomorrow? Are they going to be in the league in 5 years? And more importantly, is there any way to actually guess what's going on with this right now? I
mean, we are so far, I think, from a finish line on that. So they'll be back in court in Leon County in Tallahassee on the 22nd. So that's Monday, I think.
Yeah, that's Monday.
Arguing more things. I would not expect much of that to go differently than the last hearings in Tallahassee. But all of this is largely about venue. Almost certainly we're going to have 2 competing tracks. And if you want to include the Clemson thing, we'll have at least 4 different cases going on in 3 different jurisdictions at the same time.
Sure.
I have talked to a lot of folks that one of the interesting things that I didn't really understand, the grant of rights as a contract is largely based off of federal copyright law. So there's a decent chance all of this ends up in federal court at some point anyway.
So what does Justice Kavanaugh care about Clemson? We're going to find that out. Huh?
I mean, and look, frankly, I think if you're the ACC, there is some value in seeing how far you can keep kicking the can down the street and just maintain. If you're Clemson, if you're FSU, I know what the end game for them they would love is get out of the league scot-free, get an invitation for a full revenue stream or a full revenue share in one of these other leagues. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
No.
So you're arguing like, A, can we leave? I think we're probably at least a year out from even understanding the answer to that. B, how much does it cost to leave? And then is that a price tag we can pay? And then C, if we leave, do we have somewhere else to go? And I think everybody says, well, of course they'd have somewhere else to go. I do think they'd have somewhere else to go. The question is, how much are they going to get to go there? Because I don't think the SEC or the Big Ten right now is eager to give a full revenue share to these other schools that are trying. I mean, Oregon and Washington just came into the Big Ten at 40 cents on the dollar. Right. Adding Clemson or Florida State to the SEC is watering down their SEC network distribution. So, there are so many big questions that I think we're a long way from having an answer to.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, it's your company. It's a few floors up in the building. I think
those people do not talk to me.
Yeah. They're like, David, what now? I just don't know why ESPN would pay Florida State more money to go play Georgia than they're paying them right now, when they're all the games are still on ESPN.
It is. You're exactly right on that front, and I think so few people ask like very logical questions like this, particularly folks at #FSU Twitter, but
that's a fun group.
Yeah, it's a fun group. But the flip side of that is too. I think it is worth asking the question. I've been talking about this with folks lately. Like the SEC already is like, this is why you see Greg Sankey out there arguing in favor of like getting rid of all these automatic bids to the NCAA tournament, because they're realizing that they have too many good teams in their league, and those teams all have expectations to win 10 games, make the NCAA tournament, go to a big bowl games, whatever. There's only so much of that to go around. If you can be a team that spends and recruits in the top 20 nationally and be 12th in the ACC or in the SEC, if FSU and Clemson were to join. So if they stay put, yes, they are at a financial disadvantage. But in a lot of other ways, they have a huge advantage of not having 6 different top 25 teams on their schedule every year. Now, is there a way to address that financial disadvantage enough to make people happy, at least for the near term, so they say, well, like, look, all right, we'll make the playoffs more years than not because we're in the ACC. We are not making quite as much as Georgia's making, but we're making enough that we can survive. Let's all move forward for another 5 years. Like, to me, that's the most logical outcome here. But again, I don't know how we get to that point.
No, it doesn't seem like anyone knows how we get to that point. All I know is that Florida State fans are going to be annoyed about something.
Well, yes,
another.
I mean, whatever it is, they're going to find something.
Yeah, which that amuses me, but that doesn't really help out anything else. Like, in theory, right? Like, if you're Syracuse, if you're Wake, if you're BC, like, you're not going to threaten to leave, but at some point, you're hoping you're at least going to get a sizable check out of this, right?
And that's the other thing. People think that the whole league's going to fall apart. Like, there's just zero incentive for that to happen.
ESPN still wants to put somebody on TV.
You need to put there's hours that need to be filled. And
I'm watching TV. Yeah. Put something on.
That's like the great when the Seinfeld episode where they're pitching and they're like, well, why would people watch? Because it's on TV. Yeah. And I mean, there's something to be said for that, especially as ESPN and other networks try to shift more to a streaming product, that you need stuff to have. Yeah. You just need inventory. But, again, are you going to be splitting up a really sizable check from the schools that want to leave? Like, that's something too. And frankly, like, there's coaches who say, like, as long as we have access to the playoff, if we're guaranteed 2 spots or something like that, like, by all means, leave Clemson and Florida State. My job just got easier.
Yeah, that would get Syracuse closer to stuff like that. All right, David, always great to chat. All right, what's the Springsteen song you want to hear tonight? What's number 1 on your list?
Well, Thunder Road is probably my favorite Springsteen song, but I understand that's sort of a cop-out answer. Jungle Land, I love. I have been, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 Springsteen shows. I have never heard him play Rosalita live, so that's top of my list.
All right, Bruce, we know you're listening.
Yeah, of course.
Put it on the set list for David. Do it. All right.
I assume he's over at Dinosaur right now, like eating some ribs and just listening to this and like, oh, yeah, let's add that to the set list.
That's how I assume the show goes every day. So I'm assuming that's from 7. All right, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, man.
There he is, our guy David Hale. Always good to chat with David. His first in-studio appearance. He has threatened to be in town more this upcoming football season due to the Fran Brown of it all. So always good to see David. He may be one of the people that's stuck in traffic heading to the Dome right now, hearing it's not moving smoothly out there. So hello, anyone that's going to see the Boss tonight. Show starts 7:30 on the dot. So make sure you drive safe. But get on in there. Get on in there. Get in your seat and get ready to enjoy it in the Dome tonight. Great that he was able to make it for his makeup concert for the one that he could not get to due to health reasons in the fall. So hopefully the Boss puts on a great one in the Dome tonight. All right, we'll take a break. News in the portal? Rumblings? Something. A tweet? There's a tweet. I found a tweet. There's a tweet. We'll tell you about a tweet. Portal tweet when we come back. 4-on-1 down the line as well here on Q Sports Talk and ESPN.